Twisted Christian. Today, I want to bring you guys some updates on a lot of different issues that are currently going on right now. And the first thing that I'm going to deal with is what's going on in Iraq. We know that they have a new designated prime minister. He has until April 16th to form a government, and he's been struggling to do that. So far. Now, one of the things that I did want to point out is something that I did miss before, and maybe I didn't hear it, or when I was reading the articles previously a week ago. In this article, Iraq Prime Minister designate faces challenges in gaining political support. And of course, we kind of knew that was going to be coming already. But one of the things that I did want to point out, it says here, Zarif is the leader of the Nasser parliamentary bloc, headed by former Prime Minister Haider al-Abadi. Okay. However, this bloc is small, made up of 27 members, which means Zarif must negotiate with other political parties to secure votes, especially since Iraqi political parties are prone to changing their decisions in a blink of an eye. All right, so one of the things I did miss is that they're both part of the same party. Abadi is headed by Abadi. That party is headed by Abadi. And of course, Zarif is the leader of the parliamentary bloc. So if Abadi says, hey, this is what our members want, and if he pushes for him to RV, and we've spoken prophetically about Prophetess Solomon and what she saw in her vision as far as Abadi and Trump and a few other people that were meeting. And I've always said that, I believe Abadi should be in there. He should be the prime minister. And we don't know if this is going to happen. So, but necessarily, Abadi doesn't necessarily have to be in that position of prime minister if he's head of the party, and he could go to him and say, hey, this is what we want. This is what the Americans are pushing for. This is what Trump is pushing for. This is what they want. Right? So he could put the pressure on the new prime minister, since they're part of the same party, to actually get the RV going. But this all remains to be seen. We also know that the troops are leaving Iraq as well. We've seen that happen. We've seen them, they're pulling out troops. They're going to be putting them in different areas. And I also like this new prime minister. He's talking about Iraq first, putting the Iraqi people first. And there's only one other way that you can do that right now. There's only one other way that you can do that right now. And, of course, you have the issues with the budget and the delays and all that. And I can understand during this time period with everything going on. And also as well, there have been, the United States has been sanctioning certain companies in Iraq that have been dealing with Iran. So that's a really good thing. That's another thing that is happening. So I can see all these things taking shape, I think, by April the 16th. I think that if he can't get it together, that's still over 2 weeks away. And I know that this whole thing, waiting for things to happen, and now we have to wait even longer. Okay, and so if it doesn't happen and he ends up having to step down, we're going to be right back in that same situation. And just because he's seeming to be doing, like he really wants to prosper Iraq, he really wants to move things forward, but he may not be the guy. And I said that when Alawi was the prime minister. I said the same thing, just because that doesn't mean it's going to happen. And we saw what happened. He didn't last very long. Now, one of the things I wanted to point out, because this has been going all over Twitter and also to the 17 movement and everything else, and I think it's pretty important. Even Pippi's investment chat dealt with this too as well a little bit, but this is the article that people are talking about. Okay, and it's on Yahoo Finance. The Fed's cure risk being worse than the disease, and they think because of Donald Trump and everything that is going on. And basically, whatever this process is, what they're saying is that it's going to actually make the President of the United States basically the federal chairman. And I'm just going to read a certain part of it. Pippi does go into the Exchange Stabilization Fund, a lot more in depth, but I'm just going to touch on this particular article and what they're saying. Okay, the commercial paper funding facility buying commercial paper in the issuer, the primary market corporate credit facility buying corporate bonds from the issuer, the term asset-backed securities loan facility funding backstop for asset-backed securities, secondary market corporate credit facility buying corporate bonds and bond ETFs in the secondary market. The Main Street Business Lending Program, details are to come, but it will lend to eligible and small medium-sized businesses, complementing efforts by the Small Business Association. To put it bluntly, the Fed isn't allowed to do any of this. The central bank is only allowed to purchase or lend against securities that have government guarantee. This includes Treasury securities, agency mortgage-backed securities, and the debt issued by Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. An argument can be made that also can include municipal securities, but nothing in the laundry list is above. So how can they do this? The Fed will announce a special purpose vehicle for each acronym to conduct these operations. The Treasury, using the Exchange Stabilization Fund, will make an equity investment in each SPV and be on the first loss position. What does this mean? In essence, the Treasury, not the Fed, is buying all the securities and backstopping of loans. The Fed is acting as banker and providing finance. The Fed hired BlackRock Inc. to purchase the securities and handle the administration of the SPVs on behalf of the owner, the Treasury. In other words, the federal government is nationalizing large swaths of the financial markets. The Fed is providing the money to do it. BlackRock will be doing the trades. The scheme essentially merges the Fed and the Treasury into one organization. So meet your new Fed chairman, Donald J. Trump. All right, so basically, I don't understand everything about all of this. And the thing, of course, that stuck out to me was they basically made it so that if Donald Trump has a lot more power concerning the Federal Reserve, and this is how I'm looking at it, right? If the Federal Reserve and the Treasury Department are acting together, right, and Trump has more control over what the Fed does, and the Fed, all the central banks, they feed off what? They feed off what the Federal Reserve does and says. So, which means that if there's an order directed concerning any type of currency exchange rates, then all the other central banks would follow. Now, I don't know how much power he really has concerning that portion of it, but if Chairman Powell came out and said all the countries need to come out and they all need to be at their real rate, they all need to be at the real rate, based off of everything that's going on in their country. So that means, Vietnamese dong, Thai baht, their value would go up, right? Everybody has to adjust they're telling the central banks. Okay, so if they tell the central banks to adjust their currency, right, that's what they need to do, then they will follow. And don't forget, we still have this April 6th date. Now, a country can choose to ignore it, where the new rule goes into effect. So how do we know that the Fed, right, which is part of the Treasury, which is overseen by Donald Trump, says that the central bank, that the system needs to go by these guidelines? I don't know if I'm making any sense or not. But if everything that is going down with the global currency reset, and we've seen the President of the United States shape and mold this thing, then I can see very well of him making some type of directive that's going to also put pressure on the central banks to change their currency, to change the value of their currency. Okay, and let's go a little bit further down. It says here, and this is funny, in 2008, when something similar was done, it was done on a smaller scale. Since few understood it, the Bush and Obama administration ceded total control of those acronym programs to then Fed Chairman Ben Bernanke. He unwound them at the first available opportunity, but now, 12 years later, we have a much better understanding of how they work. And we have a president who has made it very clear how displeased he is with the central bankers haven't used their considerable power to force the Dow at least 10,000 points higher, something he's complained about many times before the pandemic hit. So what they're really afraid of is they're really afraid of him changing the way the Federal Reserve and the central banking is doing things. Okay, and it says, in effect, the Fed is giving the Treasury access to its printing press. That means, in the extreme, the administration could be free to use its control, not the Fed's control, of these SPVs to instruct the Fed to print more money so it can buy securities and hand out loans in an effort to ramp up financial markets higher going into election. Right? So now they're trying to say that they're doing this on purpose. And we already know that he's bringing changes to the system. Okay, so if the Fed controls the banking system, then the Federal Reserve is now part of the Treasury Department, and then the President of the United States is over the Treasury Department. You get what I'm trying to say. So a lot of things can change really, really fast. So that's why you always got to be prepared and be ready. And I think that, and I've said this before, when this whole virus thing took place, we talk about the why now. And it very well could be that in this month or next month or maybe within the next few months that we can actually really see a change. We don't know how the April 6th date is going to affect things, with the currency manipulation. We don't know if Trump will start directing these currencies through the through the Treasury, through the Federal Reserve System to help make these changes. And of course, it gives them also, how much power does he have now? Now, if we decide to go to a gold standard, I think whatever has taken place with this whole thing, with the Federal Reserve and the Treasury, in essence, coming together, what does it mean for the global currency reset? What does it mean for the currencies? We already know what we've discussed and other people have discussed, the President of the United States plans to change the system. So we are still in a watch and wait when it concerns Iraq. We are in a watch when it comes to certain Ken Pamet's prophecies, still waiting on some things to come out of all of this. And I'm definitely watching, we're definitely watching what's going on with the Federal Reserve System, right, and the central banking system. And I think at some point it's all going to come to a head. And of course, everything that we say, everything that we're discussing, all this is headed towards the global currency reset. And I do just want to remind you folks, with everything that's kind of going on right now, if the RV does take place in the midst of all of this, many of you are not going to be able to exchange your dinars right away. So you want to make sure that you are prepared in your various ways of being able to obtain currency, to make sure that you have your 3 currency banks that you can go to physically and exchange your location, in your 3 places you can buy a lot of the currencies that we've discussed, like the Vietnamese dong, the Thai baht, rupee, rupiah, the krones, and some other currencies. Right? You got to be able to make sure that you're in that position to be able to do that, because this is all about multiplying what we have so that you can do what is necessary for your own life and the life of your family, but also to help others too as well. Well, thank you guys for watching and listening. Please give this video a like. The more that it's liked, the more that it's recommended. And with that being said, Twisted Christian out.